Good morning, children. Let us study lesson 4, Ancient Civilizations. Let us have a small introduction of this chapter. This lesson introduces the prominent civilizations like Egypt, Mesopotamia and China. Besides this, the Greek and Roman civilization also have been introduced, and the contribution of these civilizations also have been briefly described. Today let us understand the importance of river valleys in the progress of the prominent civilizations of the world. First of all, food, water, air and light are inevitable for all or for any life to survive. So, which are the basic thing or unavoidable things for any life to be survived? That is food, water, air and light. In the same way, shelter and clothing are also the basic necessities for mankind. And generally, we get water and favorable weather conditions on the banks of rivers for leading a life. If there is no water means it is very difficult to lead a life. So, the prehistoric people, who settled on the banks of rivers, the prehistoric people settled on the banks of rivers and later civilizations prospered. So, as the people settled there, the civilization started to grow slowly. Hence, the river banks became the cradles of ancient civilizations. Hence, the river banks became what? The cradles for the ancient civilizations. Egyptian civilization flourished on the banks of river Nile. Mesopotamian civilization flourished on the banks of Euphrates and Tigris Valley. Chinese civilization flourished on the banks of Hongho and Xiqiang, and Harappan civilization on the banks of Indus. All these came into existence. All the civilization came into existence on the river banks. Now let us study the Egyptian civilization in detail. Egypt is the first civilization of the ancient world. So, which is the civilization? Which is the first civilization of ancient world? Egyptian civilization. And this civilization took birth on the banks of river Nile. So, the Egyptian civilization took birth on the banks of river Nile, and Nile is regarded as the longest river of the world. So, which river is the longest river in the world? Nile river is considered as the longest river in the world, and it is a major north flowing river in Africa which joins the Mediterranean Sea. So, the river Nile is the longest river as well as north flowing river in Africa which joins the Mediterranean Sea. Suppose if the Nile had not flown through Egypt, it would have been a desert. Suppose what would happen if Nile had not flown through Egypt, it would have become a desert, and thus Egypt is considered as a gift of Nile. So why Egypt is considered as a gift of Nile? As it flows, river Nile flows through Egypt, and it is considered as a gift of Nile. The political history of Egypt witnessed the rise of political dynasties about 5,400 years ago. The kings of Egypt were called as pharaohs. So, what were the kings called of Egypt? The kings of Egypt were called as pharaohs. Pharaohs means they are ancient Egyptian rulers. Pharaohs were both the head of the state and the religious leaders of their people. Menes was the first pharaoh. So, who was the first pharaoh? Menes was the first pharaoh. His capital was Memphis. What was the capital? Memphis was his capital. Among all the pharaohs after Menes, Khufu, Amenhotep and Thomas were prominent. Among all the pharaohs and after Menes, who were the prominent? Khufu, Amenhotep and Thomas were the prominents. The largest pyramid of Giza is called as what? Great Pyramid of Khufu. So, the largest pyramid of Giza is called as the Great Pyramid of Khufu, which was built by Khufu. Amenhotep expanded his kingdom and established an empire by his conquest or through his conquest. Thutmose first was the greatest conqueror among all the later pharaohs. Who was the greatest conqueror among all the pharaohs? Thutmose first was the greatest conqueror. And his daughter, Thutmose's daughter, Hatshepsut, came to power after him and came to be known as the first empress of the world. So, who came to power after Thutmose first and known to be the first empress of the world? That is Hatshepsut. Empress means an empress is a woman who rules an empire or who is the wife of an emperor. She came to rule or power first in the world. Finally, about 2300 years ago, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. So, who conquered Egypt? Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and he appointed his military general. Ptolemy as his representative. So, Ptolemy as his his representative, and later Ptolemy declared himself as a king of Egypt. Who declared as a king of Egypt? Ptolemy declared as a king of Egypt and established Ptolemaic dynasty. And the popular queen Cleopatra was the last ruler of this dynasty. So, who was the last ruler of this dynasty? The popular queen Cleopatra was the last ruler of this dynasty, and Egypt became a province of Rome. And now let us study about the contributions of Egyptian civilization. What were their contributions? Here, what were the food crops the people of Egypt used barley and wheat as their food crops, and the water of river Nile was used for agriculture through canals. So, how the water was used? It is used for agriculture through canals, and the conditions of the slaves were very pathetic, very bad. The condition of slaves were very bad, and large pyramids were possible because of these slaves. And women were given important status in the society. Who were given important status in the society? Women. The people of Egypt believed in life after death. Who believed life after death? The people of Egypt believed life after death. So they preserved the dead bodies, and the preserved dead body was called a mummy. So what is called mummy? The preserved dead body is called as mummy. In ancient Egypt, each city had its own guardian goddess. In ancient city had its own guardian goddess. Sun and rivers were considered and worshipped as gods. So what was worshipped as gods? Sun and rivers were considered and worshipped as gods, and Egyptian script known as hieroglyphics, which means sacred writings. What were the script of Egyptian? Hieroglyphics. They use ink to write on papyrus grass growing in river Nile. What ink they used to write? They used ink to write on papyrus grass growing in river Nile, and they had enormous knowledge of geometry, which was used in building large pyramids. They had more knowledge over geometry, and it helped to building a large pyramid. The statue of Sphinx is the most attractive Egyptian architecture. So, which is the most attractive Egyptian architecture? The statue of Sphinx was the most attractive Egyptian architecture, and Sphinx is nothing but it is a mythical creature with the head of a human or animals such as cat or sheep, and the body of a lion with wings of an eagle. The Sphinx is an animal. What is Sphinx? It is an animal with the body of a lion and head of a man. So these are the contributions of a Egyptian civilization. Hope all have understood, children. And let us continue the second civilization, the other civilization, that is the Mesopotamian civilization, which flourished on the banks of river Tigris and Euphrates Valley. Thank you.